Okay, so now that we've gone through all the different types of perspective and gone through all the grids, in this lesson I'm going to have some fun in creating a variety of different shapes. I'll be drawing all the shapes in the 3 different grids in order to give you a better understanding of how to use these shapes in these grids, as it'll give you a reference when you are creating other drawings in the future. But also along the way I'm going to give you tips and tricks in order to speed up your workflow, so you don't have to draw the full grids every single time that you want to create this shape. The purpose of this is for you to be able to visualize the shape when you are trying to draw something without having to draw the guides every single time, as it can be quite time consuming and sometimes it's quite unnecessary when you're just trying to draw a quick concept or a sketch. And like previously, there are some resources related to this lesson just down below in the resources panel which you can use if you are finding this a little difficult. 3 main shapes that we're going to be covering in this lesson will be cones, cubes and cylinders. The main reason for this is that these shapes are used everywhere, say from the leg of a character to a glass or a bottle for cylinders, and then say for example a cube is good for perspective and kind of scaling objects whilst you are drawing. Okay, so with these shapes I'm going to go for a quick demonstration of how we're going to be laying this out, and then the exercise will be you just continuing drawing these shapes. Let's just get straight into it. Okay, so in this lesson what we're going to be doing is everything that we've learnt previously with the 1, 2 and 3 perspective grids. What we're going to do is we're going to go through and draw each one in the different perspectives just to kind of get used to drawing these shapes, especially because we've not really touched on ovals. So far we've just been drawing cubes and cuboids. So this is more about getting used to creating a grid structure and then building a shape within that. So here's a guide for the cylinders, which is in the resources. It's just labeled 3D shapes. So this will be good just to kind of get an understanding of how we'll be constructing these using the grids. So I'm just going to pop this off to the side. So what I want you to do is I want you to split your paper up into the separate grids, and then we're going to create a page per shape. So we're going to do cubes and cylinders. And as we're going along, I will be giving you tips as well as how to create these without the use of the guides every single time, just to kind of save you some time in the future when creating more drawings and illustrations. So firstly, we're going to do the 1-point perspective, as you can see in the example. Do pause the video if you do want some time just to kind of get yourself ready, and then yeah, just continue along at your own pace. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill each one with a few rough sketches. We want it to be nice and rough just to kind of get used to the concept. We don't want perfect shapes. This is just purely to understand the concept without having to draw the lines each time. So 1 point. With this one I'm going to do and like we did before, we're just going to draw circles, and now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and join them all up to the 1-point perspective. So there's 1-point perspective. Now let's move on to 2-point. So for this I'm going to keep in the center 2 points either side, draw myself a little horizon line, and then let's go in. So we've not created a cylinder in a 2-point perspective before, so what we're going to do is we're going to be starting off similar to the cube. So let's start off with our 2 lines either side. So imagine we want a cylinder here. And then now what we need to do is when we're drawing cylinders or curved shapes, it generally goes within a square. So what we're going to do first is find our midpoint. You need to be drawing the shape on both sides. So here's the cuboid that the cylinder will be in. So what we need to do now is, using what we learned in the first lesson, we need to fill this with an oval. So there's our cylinder. This is how you construct it, and I'll show you again in this one because in case that was a little too confusing or a little too fast. Understanding how these cylinders work with regards to the horizon line. So off here what I'm going to show you is a quick concept that I learned that's helped me a lot to speed up my workflow without having to draw these cubes every single time. One thing I've learned is the closer that the cylinder is to the horizon line, the more narrower the oval will be. So on the horizon line it'll just be a straight line because it's almost like you're looking directly at it, and then as you come above it you'll have narrower, and then the higher you go the more closer to a circle the oval will be. So this is something to know. As you can see here, like the horizon lines here, so both ovals are the same. This is a quick way of just understanding how to draw these shapes without having to have to draw the guides. So with this one, what we're going to be doing is I'll be drawing 2 converging lines here, and then depending on where the horizon line is, so say if I draw the horizon line here and here, so remember what we learned, these lines have to be converging, and then because of what we just learnt here, where the closer it is to the horizon line, the more narrow the shape should be. So say if we draw a narrow oval there, and then the further away it gets, the more open it gets. So there's a much quicker way of drawing cylinders without having to draw all the guides. This is the perspective that I mainly draw in, as this is what the eye sees. So this is the closest thing to be able to create realistic drawings and sketches when you are trying to create something. Say for example we have ourselves a horizon line, okay? Please do follow along just to understand this. And then a center line. So because we want the vanishing point above the horizon line now, we're going to have the lines converging this way. So now we're going to be looking up at the cylinder. So like what I said, at the bottom, the closer it is to the horizon line, the narrower the oval is, and then the more you get away from the horizon line, the more it opens into a circle. So when drawing a cylinder, if you realise I've always drawn a centre line, just to give us an axis of which we want the shape to be on. And then what we want to make sure is that the shape we're drawing is perpendicular to the line, meaning that there's a right angle here. This is really important to make the shape convincing. So I want the shape to be narrow, so I'm going to turn my page for this. And then again, because it's going to be converging, because it is going to be going away from us, and then on this side it's going to be a lot more open. And I'm going to draw in my converging lines. So say if I went from the top, so converging. So now with a fresh piece of paper, let's get into the cubes. So like what we did in the first one, I'm going to draw one in 1 point perspective, 2 point perspective, and then 3. And I'll be showing you the tips and tricks that I use as well to make your drawing a lot more quicker. So with 1 point again, decide where your vanishing point is. So we're going to do one down here this time. And like we said, we're going to start off with a square. And with this, try to make sure your proportions are good. Make sure you are drawing a square. And then like we said, we've got 3 points which can be seen by the vanishing point, so we're just going to join these up. This is where proportions come in, so we want to make sure that it is looking and create a few more. So let's draw a square. So let's move on to 2 point perspective now. Spend as much time as you want with that. Do have some practice. Now for 2 point perspective, again, so we're going to have our vanishing points in the center. And like we said, we're going to start off with just a straight line. And then again, vertical lines. You see what I did there? So I started adding some lines, but it was only very faintly until I got a visual look at it, and then I was like, okay, I'm happy with the way that looks. So let's fill this page up so you can do. And now for 3 points. So for this one, I'm not going to draw any guides, any dots. It's all just going to be based on the information that we know from these in order to create cubes in different views. Okay. So I'll show you the one, and then like we did in the previous one with the cylinders, we'll go through and we'll use a separate piece of paper just to work on different views. So it's similar to this one. So we always start off with a center line. Let's turn the page so I can get a nice straight line. So we always start off with a center line, like so. And the only difference is we make sure that the lines, instead of going straight, we want these to be converging as well. So it doesn't need to be as dramatic as what we did. And there we have a very basic cube. So now let's go into a separate piece of paper and we're just going to fill these again with cubes, but without using the guides, just to get used to drawing these shapes. So here we have it. I've gone through and I've filled out a full piece of paper with a bunch of cubes in different orientations based on what we learned with the 3 different perspective lessons. The key takeaways, like I said, whilst you're drawing your cylinders, is to make sure that when the line is close to the horizon, that the oval is a lot more narrow, and the further away you get from the horizon line, the more the oval opens up closer to a circle. If you keep this in mind, it'll make drawing a lot more simpler. Okay, so as a quick recap of this lesson, we went through how you can draw all the different shapes in the different perspective grids, and then I gave you some tips as well of how you can recreate these shapes without the grids. In the next lesson, we're going to be using the shapes that we just created and building upon them by adding a mesh. Let's get to it.